And we are back with part 2 of this week's Bible study for Waymaker Messianic Jewish and Christian Center USA. We are reading from the Messianic Jewish Family Bible, Tree of Life version, TLV. And this week we're covering the entire book of Daniel. We are going to continue moving into chapter 3. A gold idol and a blazing furnace. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the authorities of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the satraps, administrators, governors, counselors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the authorities of the provinces assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had erected. There stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will that same hour be thrown into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire." Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and pipes, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. At that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and denounced the Jews. They spoke up and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. You, O king, made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the golden image, and that whosoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. There are certain Jews whom you appointed over the administration of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those men pay no heed to you, O king. They do not serve your gods, nor will they worship the golden image that you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar ordered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be summoned. When these men were brought before the king, Nebuchadnezzar responded to them, saying, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you don't serve my gods or worship the golden image that I set up? Now, if you are ready at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image that I have made. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be thrown into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. Then what God will be able to deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, saying, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to answer you concerning this matter. If it is so, our God, whom we serve, is able to save us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. Yet even he does not let it be, Yet even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image that you set up." So they're basically saying, they're being true to God Almighty, the one true God. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with rage, and the appearance of his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than it was normally heated, and commanded some of the mighty men in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. So these men, wearing their robes, tunics, hats, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. But because the king's order was so urgent and the furnace was so extremely hot, a raging flame killed those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and leapt to his feet. He asked his ministers, "Didn't we cast 3 men bound into the middle of the fire?" They replied to the king, "Surely, O king." But he answered, saying, "Look, I see 4 men walking about unbound and unharmed in the middle of the fire, and the fourth has the appearance like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of blazing fire and exclaimed, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the middle of the fire. When the satraps, administrators, governors, and royal ministers had gathered around, they saw the fire had no effect on the bodies of these men. Not a hair of their head was singed, nor were their robes scorched, nor was there a smell of fire on them. Nebuchadnezzar exclaimed, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him." They defied the king's edict and to give and, and to give up their lives rather than to serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I hereby decree that any people, nation, or language that says anything slanderous against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn limb from limb, and their house made a pile of rubble, because there is no other God that is able to deliver in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges God's kingdom. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and languages who dwell in all the earth, may your peace abound. It seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders that God Most High has done for me. How great are his signs! How mighty are his wonders! His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, his dominion from generation to generation. So this was the escape from the fiery furnace, was with the presence of Yeshua there in the midst of that fire with the 3 Hebrew boys. So chapter 4 is the second dream. The dream is chop down the tree. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and flourishing in my palace. I had a dream that frightened me while on my bed. The images and visions in my mind terrified me, so I issued a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me so that they could make known to me the meaning of the dream. When the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and diviners came in, I recounted the dream to them, but they were unable to make known its interpretation to me. Finally, Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, and that's Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, came in before me, and I told him the dream. I, Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery baffles you. Consider my dream that I have seen, and tell me its interpretation. This is Nebuchadnezzar saying this to Daniel. And again, his Babylonian name is Belteshazzar. These are the visions in my head. While I was on my bed, I looked, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large, and it became strong, and its top reached to heaven. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Beneath it the beasts of the field found shade, and birds of the sky lived in its branches, and from it all creatures were fed. I was watching the visions in my mind while on my bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. He called loudly, saying, "Chop down the tree, and cut off its branches, strip off its leaves, and scatter its fruit. Let beasts flee from under it, and birds from its branches, yet leave a stump with its roots in the earth, in fetters of iron and bronze. It's in the tender grass of the field. Let him be damp with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the animals in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be altered from that of a man, and let an animal's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him." This sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the verdict by the command of the holy ones, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over the realm of man, and bestows it to whomever he wishes, and may set over them even the lowliest of men. I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw this dream. Now you, Belteshazzar, tell me its meaning, for none of the wise men of my kingdom are able to make known to me its interpretation, but you are able, for the Spirit of the Holy God is in you. Interpretation: a king eats grass. Then Daniel, whose name is also Belteshazzar, was perplexed for a brief time. His thoughts alarmed him. The king answered and said, Belteshazzar, don't let the dream or the interpretation disturb you. But Belteshazzar replied, My lord, may the dream be for those who hate you, and the interpretation for your enemies. The tree that you saw grow large and strong, whose top reached to heaven, and that was visible to all the earth, whose leaves were beautiful, and whose fruit was so abundant that there was food for all in it, and beneath which the beasts of the field lived, and in its branches birds of the sky dwelt. It is for you, O king, for you have grown great and mighty. Your greatness reaches to heaven, and your authority extends to the ends of the earth. You, O king, saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven, and saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it, yet leave a stump with its roots in the ground, in fetters of iron and bronze, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field until 7 periods pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king. It is the decree of the Most High that has come upon my lord the king. You will be driven away from people and will dwell with the wild animals. You will feed on grass like an ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 periods of time will pass over you until you know that the Most High is sovereign over the realm of mankind and gives it to whomever he wishes. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its root means that your kingdom will be restored to you as soon as you understand that heaven is sovereign. Therefore, O king, may my counsel be acceptable to you. Renounce your sins through righteousness and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps your prosperity will be prolonged. Nebuchadnezzar's dream fulfilled. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months. As he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, the king exclaimed, Is this not the great Babylon that I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for glory of my majesty? The words were still in the king's mouth when a voice fell from heaven. King Nebuchadnezzar, it has been decreed to you that your kingdom has been removed from you. You will be driven away from men, and you will live with the beasts of the field. You will feed on grass like an ox, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you come to know that the Most High is sovereign over the realm of mankind and gives it to whomever he wishes. Immediately the word about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from men, ate grass like an ox, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven, until his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. But at the end of the appointed days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes up to heaven, and my sanity returned to me. So I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing. He does as he wills with the army of heaven and the inhabitants of the earth. No one can hold back his hand, or say to him, What have you done? At that moment my sanity returned to me, and my majesty and my splendor were restored to me for the glory of my kingdom. My ministers and nobles sought me out, and I was reestablished over my kingdom. I became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, because all his works are right, and his ways just. He is able to humble those who walk in pride. So Nebuchadnezzar actually learned his lesson, and he gave glory to God in heaven. So next we have chapter 5, the handwriting on the wall. King Belshazzar, now this is spelled differently than Daniel's Babylonian name, uh, Shazzar, held a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles, and was drinking wine in front of the 1,000. When Belshazzar tasted the wine, he issued an order to bring in the gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem. So this is the foolish king, actually. Um, so that the king and his nobles, his consorts and his concubines could drink from them. So they brought the gold vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, consorts, and concubines drank from them. They drank the wine and praised the gods made of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. At that very moment, the fingers of a human hand emerged and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, opposite the lampstand, so that the king could see the back of the hand that was writing. The color drained from the king's face. His thoughts alarmed him. His hips gave way and his knees began knocking together. The king called loudly to summon the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the diviners. The king said to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain around his neck and will have authority as the third ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the inscription nor tell the king what it meant. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew pale. His nobles were baffled. The queen, hearing the words of the king and his nobles, entered the banquet hall. The queen spoke out and said, "May the king live forever. Do not let your thoughts frighten you, or your face be so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the days of your father, then he was found to have insight and intelligence was and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods. So King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, made him chief of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and diviners. This man Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, yeah, can't say that right, Belteshazzar, was found to have extraordinary spirit, knowledge, and insight for interpreting dreams, explaining riddles, and solving problems. Now let Daniel be summoned, and he will explain the interpretation." So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to Daniel, "Are you Daniel, whom is one of the captives of Judah, that my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard about you, how a spirit of the gods is in you, and how there has been found in you insight, discernment, and extraordinary wisdom. Just now the wise men and diviners were brought before me to read this writing and to make its meaning known to me, but they are unable to declare its interpretation. However, I have heard about you that you are able to provide interpretations and to solve difficult problems. Now, if you're able to read the writing and explain to me its meaning, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain around your neck and have the authority to rule as the third in the kingdom." Then Daniel answered the king, saying, "You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and tell him its meaning. Your Majesty, God Most High gave your father Nebuchadnezzar the kingdom, as well as greatness, glory, and splendor. Because of the grandeur that he bestowed on him, all the peoples, nations, and languages dreaded and feared him. He killed whomever he wanted and spared anyone he wanted. He raised up whomever he wished, and humbled anyone he wished. But when his heart became haughty and his spirit hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from among men, and his mind became like an animal, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. He fed on grass like an ox, and his body was damp with the dew of heaven until he recognized that God Most High is sovereign over the realm of mankind, and that he sets up over it whomever he wills. But you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all this. Instead, you have exalted yourself against the Lord of heaven. You had the vessels of his house brought before you, and your nobles, your consorts, and your concubines have been drinking wine in them. You have praised the gods made of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. Yet you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your very breath and all your ways. Therefore the hand was sent from him that wrote this inscription. Now this is the writing that was inscribed. Many, many tekel upharsin. This is the interpretation of the inscription. Many, God has numbered your days of your reign, the days of your reign, and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then, as Belshazzar his command, they clothed Daniel with purple, put a chain of gold around his neck, and issued a proclamation about him that he would have the authority as third ruler in the kingdom. On that very night, King Belshazzar of the Chaldeans was slain. So I'm going to pause it here and I'm going to come back with a part 3. We're going to begin chapter 6.